to get a convention. They were up to 31 applications. The convention was just about to be called, and then the Senate said, oh, we were for it all along anyway, and they passed it. And so it became the 17th Amendment.
In other words, just the threat of the state calling a convention for the purpose of bringing forward an amendment has resulted in the Congress going, whoa, wait, we'd rather write it than let you guys write it.
That's exactly right.
So we're going to write up the 17th Amendment and send it out to the states, which, of course, they ratified. All right, so this has happened. It's just that when it happens, it usually is enough to scare the people in Congress to give us what we want.
Maybe not usually. For example, in the 80s and 90s, people really wanted a balanced budget amendment. Right. We needed 34 states to get a convention because Congress wouldn't pass it. We got 32 states. And so Congress said, well, we'll try to pass it. It did get through the House of Representatives. It got the necessary 2/3 vote. But when it got to the Senate, it was blocked. They couldn't get it through. And so in that case, the advocates of deficit spending managed to survive. They faced the issue down. So if you, in the interest of openness, if you use this process, you have to be ready to go to the convention. But I think we're at the point where there's really no other way to deal with the problem because, let's face it, Congress, under whatever party, is not going to reform itself.
Well, and they have no incentive to.
No, they have every incentive not to.
It's one of the reasons why states like Colorado, which was founded 100 years after the federal government was founded, we understood that we can't trust government. And that's why we had that safeguard of the initiative and the referendum process. The referendum process, which people don't even know about here in Colorado, says that when the state legislature passes a bill, if we don't like it, we can have it referred and we can pull it out, say, no, we don't like what you did. We never would have term limits. We never would have had a campaign finance reform, as much as I dislike that. It would never pass through the legislature. It was referred in. But the federal government, a product of a different time, doesn't have that safeguard. So the safeguard is through the legislature.
Yeah, the key is here, who is the government? The government is our agents. Who's the boss? The boss is the people. The Article 5 amendment process, the convention process, like the initiative process on the state level, is a way of calling the agent, our employees, to account and saying, you're screwing up, time for you to do a better job.
All right. We've only got about 4 minutes left. Let me move it to a couple other things.
Sure.
This idea of a living, breathing Constitution versus a Constitution sent down on the tablets from Moses, this is a living, breathing document, and that the courts can read it and say, no, not quite. That's not what we meant. Yeah, they meant it 200 years ago, but times have changed. Let's face it. The founders didn't know talk radio or the internet was coming when they put together the First Amendment. So therefore, we need different regulations, maybe the fairness doctrine. That's fine. Tell me a little bit about that debate.
Sure. First off, that's a false dichotomy, as we'd say in law. It's not really that the Constitution is either living, breathing in the sense that many progressives claim, nor is it absolutely unchangeable and on stone. Okay. It was designed by the founders to be a document to last for the ages. So there are provisions in there, like the amendment process, like some other provisions that allow a certain amount of flexibility. That's not enough for many progressives. They don't want flexibility, and they really don't want a living Constitution. They want a dead Constitution. They want one that really doesn't control the government at all, except maybe in a few areas that they like. And so really what they're advocating is no Constitution, or something like the British unwritten Constitution, where Parliament ultimately can do anything, just like they claim Congress ultimately can do almost anything. Well, if they want that, they got a great alternative. They could move back to Britain. I'm sure Britain is accepting immigrants, because that's what we rebelled against. Okay, as Americans, we want a written Constitution with a certain amount of flexibility, but one that limits the politicians in concrete ways.
Talk to me a little bit about how we got here. You know, I'm thinking of how the states got together and put together the Constitution. They wanted something to make sure they all could work together to provide for the common defense, to make sure that we had a single dollar. That made sense, you know, to make sure that we had some standards, to make sure that we could cross borders freely without, you know, Texas having an extra Texas tariff, which they want. You know, so we have I understand why they want it. How did it come that this document, which was created by the states, now creates a government that runs roughshod over the states?
The big change, I mean, there were changes all along, but the big incremental change was during the New Deal. You had a time of terrible economic distress, and people knew even less about economics than they know today, and they believed the policymakers when they said, you know, the federal government can solve the Depression, which of course they never did. And then of course we went from the New Deal right into World War II, when people were not in a mood to argue with the power of government. And so if you look at the Supreme Court basically abdicated along a whole wide front of areas in that time. And if you look at most of the cases that were the turning points, they happened in that period. Later New Deal, World War II.
And here we are now.
And here we are now.
Can we get it back?
I think we can. But ultimately, you know, the Constitution, the founders themselves said, ultimately, it's words on parchment unless it's inscribed in the hearts of the people.
This is not a liberal or conservative thing. This is not a progressive versus free market thing. This is
the rule of law,
rules.
John. It's the rule of law, without which freedom cannot exist.
All right. So you want the original Constitution, what it actually said and meant. Now I'm seeing these in bookstores everywhere. So we'll grab one.
Buy one.
So buy one, or go to Amazon and grab one. Rob Natelson, thank you. It's always a pleasure. This is some good stuff. And thank you. You can learn more about this and actually buy an online edition. Go to independenceinstitute.org. Listen for me late nights on 850 KOA. Got some great podcasts, by the way. Go to ivoices.org, and you can listen to this guy talking about policy all you like. Tell a friend about Devil's Advocate. We'll see you next week.